Okay, calling to order Committee on Ways and Means. This morning we'll hear from the Department of Taxation who will present their biennium budget requests. Good morning.
Good morning, Gary Sugunuma, Director of the Department of Taxation. Good morning, Chair Dela Cruz, Vice Chair Moriwaki, and honorable members of the Senate Committee on Ways and Means. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present our biennium budget through fiscal year 2027. May I introduce my team members here? Next to me is Deputy Director Kristen Sakamoto. Gary Yamashiroya is my special assistant. Min Ming is our Administrative Services Officer. Corey Higa is our IT Services Office Chief. Dr. Seth Kobe is our Research and Planning Officer. Winston Wong is our Administrative Rules Officer. Nikki Thompson, Taxation Services Administrator. Regina Ewan, Taxation Compliance Administrator. Susan Adamson, Acting Tax Collector. Titin Sakata, Business Analyst Supervisor. Gordon Zane, Special Enforcement Section Supervisor. Ryan Kaya, Criminal Investigations Section Supervisor. And Emil Acosta is an accountant. As you folks know, the Department of Taxation is responsible for collecting the tax revenues that fund many important programs and services and basically fund state government. Last year, the department collected approximately $10.25 billion in tax revenues that required the processing of over 3 million returns, processed over 2.3 million electronic payments, attended to 270,000 phone calls, assisted 51,000 taxpayers at our various customer windows on Oahu and the neighbor islands, issued over 41,000 tax-related licenses, registrations, and permits, processed over 20,000 tax clearance applications, completed more than 20,000 audits in the combined amount of approximately $233 million, collected more than $300 million in delinquent taxes, and our special enforcement section is credited with recovering over $50 million from non-compliant taxpayers and conducted 23 team visits to 39 different venues last fiscal year. During those visits, they educated more than 1,600 individual taxpayers regarding their state tax obligations. Our budget request for the upcoming biennium is a request for resources basically to allow the department to continue doing all of this work. We're seeking resources that will also help build capacity so that we can do more and so that we can operate more efficiently. Chair, would you like me to go line by line through table 4?
No, table 6.
Okay. Yeah, the first request, department priority number 1, is seeking additional funding for monitoring and maintenance of our tax system modernization, our application. So the money that we're seeking is to cover annual vendor price increases, approximately 3.5% per year, for equipment maintenance and support services relating to the department's TSM or Gen Tax. As you folks know, that's the department software solution, specially designed for Department of Taxation and we're continuously updating that system to perform tax administration. It also provides taxpayers with a convenient and secure filing option through HTO. The request also includes $750,000 in fiscal year 2027, and this is to replace 2 scanners that will be reaching the end of the 10-year service life in 2027. So the scanners are critical and essential to our operations. We use them to create digital records of everything submitted to us on paper so that they can be put into the TSM or Gentac system, either for processing or we can store that data for other uses. If we don't get funding to replace the 2 scanners in 2027, the current scanners we have will no longer be under service warranty. So if something happens to the scanners and they go down, we won't have an easy way to get them serviced and working again. So, and that's just that is a one-time expense in 2027. It's a purchase. We're also asking for $100,000 in both fiscal year 26 and 27 for artificial intelligence consultation, so AI consultation. It's basically a product trial and a way for us to explore how AI can help us do our jobs more efficiently and better.
Chair,
Question.
can I have a question? Yeah, you want to go first? Go ahead.
So this additional amount, is that in addition to the 3.1 million? So how is this different from the annual funding that you have on an ongoing basis?
For the
For your
purchase.
for your additional funding of 1.3. No, for 2026, 338,150.
Okay, so the
That's for
additional
the
amount,
scanners or what?
the additional amount of 338,150 in fiscal year 26 is for annual vendor price increases. Those vendor price increases, as I said, increases 3.5% per year. So the increase in fiscal 27 for vendor price increases, we need 593,400 to cover that over what we have right now. And then when you add on the $750,000 one-time expense for the printers in fiscal 27, then the total is the $1.3 million
But
figure.
it'll go back down.
It will, yes.
And does this, we've talked about growing your own. Does this contract at the 3.1 million stay that way, or is it reducing because I see the next priority that you're increasing staff? So how is your IT staff operating?
We do have a long-term plan to train up and build software developer expertise within the department. So with your folks' help, last year we were approved for exempt IT positions. And we got one position last year, which we already filled. And so the plan this year, and you'll see in the subsequent request that I'm going to talk about, we're asking for one additional developer in 2026 and one additional exempt developer in 2027. The long-term plan, I believe, is by 2031, we will have a team of, I believe, 4 exempt developers, and that will allow us to reduce our 1 FTE of contracted services from FAST.
So the FAST contract will be reduced, and what is the timeline for that? The 3.1 annual cost to FAST.
So I think we have the numbers. The amount paid to FAST, as I said, is not going to be reduced until 2031 if we're able to build enough expertise to reduce our FTEs by 1 in 2031. 1 FTE in 2031 will be something over 500,000. But we're creating these exempt positions, but also giving up civil service. I believe 2 civil service IT developer positions to help fund the exempt positions that we're creating. So I think the net is we're going to be better off, I believe, by about $200,000 in 2031. Over what
So
we're
of the
paying right now.
3.1 million, you're just going to save 200,000, or how is that going to shrink because you're adding on more positions to do the work? What do you actually gain from adding the positions versus keeping the contract that you have of the 3.1 million every year?
Yes, I would agree with this. It's not a huge cost savings. But
I did just want to clarify the professional services that we're talking about. It's just a portion, although it's a big portion of the 3.1, because we have different contracts with FAST and other services. So the professional services currently account for about 2.2 million. And then the trade-off at the end of 2031, like Director said, would net about, I think, 200,000.
$200,000.
Let me see what the breakdown is of what you paid FAST for the
Yes, we
3.1?
have that breakdown available.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, the different contracts that they have. And are you going to use FAST to help with the direct pay or direct,
Online.
The direct file
File,
that we're
right.
also asking for. Yes, so because we already have FTEs from FAST, our plan is to utilize the ones we already have contracted to help with the direct file.
then why are you folks asking for all these positions? That, I have a problem with this. And do you have a current org chart? Because the org chart we got that you gave us is not current. I think it's last year's. But we've given you all the positions in the past, and Ledge gave you senior software positions, and now you're asking for 7 more positions, and shouldn't these positions be in ITSU?
So the team that we're requesting for the direct file, those are more business side type positions. So they're different. They would have different functions from the developers and the work that FAST.
Well, and that's why we need to see
Executes.
an org chart, because I'm looking at your org chart for the technology, ITSU, and you have all these general professional 4 positions, and you're asking for these, more of these program specialist positions as well. And then you're asking for this data officer that's going to report directly to the director, right? This
Yes.
data, shouldn't that be under ITSU? I mean, it's like, it's very convoluted here.
So the data privacy officer, that request is a result of the IRS requirement that we have a senior official that's responsible for keeping track of all the privacy laws on the federal and state and local level. So that function would not be like a IT or developer type of role. It would be a little more legal and compliance oriented.
Security officer, like a security officer?
I think there would be some function security related as well, yes.
Okay, but right now you don't have a security type of officer. Aren't you using like a security analyst?
We don't have anyone specifically assigned to monitor the security requirements of the IRS right now. We do have other security.
You have security, you have the whole security. See, and that's why it's very convoluted. And then we asked you questions about some of your hiring, and then you said that, you know, the law allows you to hire whoever you want. I mean, we had questions on some of these. We sent you, I think.
Yeah, the MQs
Yeah,
for
the
exempt
MQs.
position.
And so I'm not sure how you're using these positions, or you're hiring people and you're putting in positions. You ask us for these higher positions, we give it to you. You don't bring in new people, you just move the people up. And yet I'm not sure what's happening to the lower positions. So we need to have a better handle of all these positions and how you're using FAST. And because even for direct file, initially it's going to take us a while, but then later it's going to be just maintenance. But if you're going to use FAST, then why you need all these positions? See the concern that we have here?
Yeah, the FAST takes care of the software development portion of what needs to be changed, but the project is more than just software development, right? It's gonna, you know, it's a lot of the business analysts and the other project managers have to have an understanding of changes that need to be made in compliance with what the law requires, and then how our department actually needs the changes to be made to conform to how we do business, how we do our business in the building, right? So the programmers can only do their job if we are able to articulate to them what programming needs to be done. And so these other, so every year we encounter the same problems with, you know, tax law changes. Every year tax laws are tweaked. The programmers won't know what to do. We have to tell them, okay, this is how the law changed, and this is what needs to be changed in the system as a result of changing the law. And you have to do it a certain way because this is how we account for things. This is how we take in data. This is how our forms work. And so those are the positions that we need, really. We're not asking for any more FTEs from FAST to do any of the developer work. We're trying to build that expertise in-house, but we can't do it overnight.
So who's managing the IT security now?
We have our IT section chief, Corey Higa. He has recently hired someone to help with security, but that's to keep our system secure. And it's not necessarily to prevent us from getting in trouble with the IRS in terms of how we're supposed to secure how we're supposed to handle federal information directly from them.
Okay, I think you have to do a better job in giving us a better picture, because it's very easy to say, oh yeah, IRS wants this, IRS wants that. We don't, and so a lot of us are not really up on all this IRS. And so it's like, oh wow, we just got to give you this position. We got to give you this position. And we don't know how they all come together. And you have a whole list of vacancies as well in all of these positions, which you say you're going to fill by 3/31/25. Every single position vacant on this sheet are going to be filled by 3/1/25. Now, somebody in your office is really just putting one date on, because I doubt that you're going to hire all these people by 3/31/25, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. That was an oversight. I take responsibility for that.
Okay.
But let you know, on the vacancy report, there are 67 positions. So we have 114 vacancies right now, 100 of which are funded. 67 are in active recruitment. So those, I would stand by the 3-month time frame to fill. That's what we're trying to
We
do.
believe you when you give it to all of us. You give
But-
this to us like this.
I agree
right?
with you. The ones that are not in recruitment, yes, that is an unrealistic timeline.
Okay, so can you submit to us? And maybe we should have a briefing with just tax alone, because it's so complicated and so convoluted, and the way they're using positions and exempt positions and creating positions is really questionable at this point.
Senator Elefante.
Yes, in follow-up to Senator Kim's question, Director and Deputy Director, two-part question. Is there a correlation with that item on table 6 that we're talking about for your positions in relation to table 14, contract costs with your active contract of 80 million for FAST? And will that be a reoccurring contract at 80 million if you're asking for positions? It's at the top of table 14.
Yeah, no, that was I believe that's the total cost for the 10-year contract with FAST. That was the total cost. So what we're doing now is we're at the end of the 10-year that 10-year contract. And so we are negotiating another 10-year term right now. And so the request in priority 1 asking for funding incorporates the annual 3.5% increase per year. And so we're trying to get that into a set contract for the next 10-year period.
So can I follow up?
Yeah, good.
Okay, so what about the business support staff for FAST? So, yeah, we need a complete breakdown on FAST and what this amount is covering at over 10 years, and how do they factor in? Because this is like TSM all over again.
Have a general breakdown of the FAST contract with us now, if you want us to.
And so is FAST and direct file, because you seem to be building up a whole thing for direct file, which right now the feds are not even certain. They're on the fence right now with direct file. So you're kind of building up for direct file, it seems, right? And so are these going to be 2 separate teams? FAST and direct file? You just told me earlier that you're going to use FAST to help you with direct file. So how is that
Yes.
related?
Yeah, go ahead. He can. Yeah, sure. Just state your name.
Good morning, Corey Higa, IT officer. So direct file is our own equivalent of like a TurboTax H&R block, right? So it's a big project for us. And a lot of the complication that we do is building the questions and putting it in the user-friendly format, right? So taxes are complicated, and to get all of that into development requirements, we need a team behind that, right? To make sure that what we're building is going to be usable by the taxpayer. So we hire our software developers fast to be experts in development. they're not experts in tax, right? So this team that we're hiring and the positions that we're adding is to help us give us additional tax expertise to interface with the developers to put these tax requirements into development requirements, and we're going to use our existing development staff to develop on top of that. So we're going to develop on top of our FAST system using existing developers. We're going to add one or two to supplement this work. And the work is going to start small and it's going to get bigger because they're going to add new tax situations every year. So it's going to expand and expand. And so this is a whole new system that we're going to need to support. And so we're adding, in order for us to be successful in that, we need the bodies to continue to support, and we're going to have to continue tests every year. As tax law changes come, as income rates changes, we have to retest the entire system every year.
What's the projection of what this is going to cost us and what kind of teams? Because they seem to keep adding on these huge teams and all these positions.
Yeah, so from a development side, we're only asking for one position this year and another position next year.
Yeah, but
Right,
but
the
at
6
the
or
end of the
7.
day- at the end of the day, you're saying you're going to need a team. So what is that team going to look like?
So what we're trying to develop is the program office. So you see a lot of the positions are under a program office, right? So we're trying to develop a new team that's in charge of our side that's facing the taxpayers that are going to have to support this system. And that's going to be the program office. And the program office is going to help us develop the requirements that we need to build to develop. So we're making sure that we're staying in sync with the laws on both the federal and the state side, as well as helping train our taxpayers and our internal staff on how the new system is supposed to work.
And so FAST is going to help with this.
FAST is going to help with the development. So
So is
FAST
that
is
gonna
giving
be
us
a-
software
Is
developers,
that
right?
gonna
They're
be
not giving us
additional
tax
funds?
experts.
We have to pay FAST to do that? Another
So
contract
we're
with
using,
FAST?
so we're using our existing development support that we hire fast. So we do new development every year for some of the tax law changes, some of the federal changes, as well as some of the product updates.
So we don't
FAST
have to increase their contract or give them another contract?
In our proposal, we're not adding any additional fast developers to support direct file. We're using our existing amount
For
FTE
now.
that we've have used in the past.
And for the
now.
future?
That's our plan. You know, depending on how work and requirements change, we don't expect to need any additional fast, especially with the buildup of our internal IT team.
What happens if the feds don't go forward on direct file?
So we have a lot of other projects that we feel that we could use those resources for. But
Okay, can you give us a
That's-
list of what they're going to be used for? Because you keep building all of these teams and
Yes.
then we don't get rid of them. It's like they stay on the books.
yeah, so we are continuing to build out our Hawaii Tax Online. So, you know, every tax law that we get, we do make sure that we have electronic filing options, as well as we are increasing our compliance efforts, putting a lot more upfront checks into the data that we receive. So making sure that the tax returns that come in, we put in a lot more validation upfront to make sure that we're not sending out money and then having to recall it because we see errors in the tax returns. So we do have a lot more emphasis into data validation, identity protection upfront, and we are continually to build our system as well as upgrades to keep it modernized.
Okay, well, you're going to have to give us a lot more information.
Sure.
Details.
Senator Favela.
Yeah, just would be a couple of questions, but I'm just gonna go with the one. You're asking for 7 new positions for information and technology services, right?
Yes.
So you guys can, so you guys get 6 vacancies in information on technology and position listed for your vacancy report. Reprogramming and having this technology, you guys cannot use those 6 vacancies to fill instead of asking for 6 new, without the 7 new positions?
Yeah, so the vacancies
that's-
they're
but-
spread out in different areas.
You know, the reason why I'm saying is because in 2019, 3 out of the 6 vacancies been vacant.
Yeah, so the vacancies within IT are in different areas. We've had success recently hiring developers and other positions. So we've been able to hire 9 developers in the past 3 years. We've downgraded to entry level and we're doing a good job of training them. But with this additional work, and especially with direct file that's projected to go indefinitely, we feel the need to establish positions now at the outset. And we are working on hiring. We are filling positions. Our vacancy rate is reducing every year. But this is a lot of work, and without asking for the positions up front, I think we're setting us up to fail when the more work comes and we don't have the positions there for us. So
I understand that, but what I'm trying to explain to you is that you're asking for positions in advance to better quality of work at that, but even what Senator Kim just said, right, whoever can fill up the paperwork said you're gonna fill up all these positions in March. The reality is, again, like I don't know if you guys watch the rest of the committee, she's been accurate on the sense that every single committee come before us, say they're gonna fill the vacancies. One of them said they're gonna do them in July. You guys saying in March, some saying in February. So what is the reality to that? I like know because I understand you predicting that you're gonna need these positions, but you had positions that was vacant already from 2019. So is these positions already filled? The 6 vacancies for the technology that you guys are asking for? Is it filled? Or is those the positions in March you guys are gonna fill? Because you're asking for 7 new positions. So to me, if you fill the 6, I'm not saying you guys have more, but I know you guys have more. But if you fill out the 6 out of the 3 been vacant since 2019.
yes,
So-
understood. Yeah, so we're working to fill it. The reality is that we can't take on additional work without the additional resources, right?
No, but what I'm saying is, okay, what I'm saying, you guys been doing the work all this time, the position hasn't been filled since 2019. So if you're talking about being for, run for, in good quality work, whatever, shouldn't that been filled? And then when you come here and ask for the extra positions, then you can say you need them to continue to grow and get better. But not fill them, and then you're telling us what you just said now,
Yeah.
that you need to do it in a timely manner.
Understood. But the reason why we're asking for the additional position is additional work. So, and we've been doing the work with our current positions, our current vacancies, but we're asking for the additional positions for the additional work, right? And
So
so that's
7 plus 3 then, that's what you're gonna need, or 7 plus 6, what is it?
the-
You're asking for 7, you get 6 opening, 3 out of the 6 is vacant since 2019, so what do you need, 6, 7, 8, 9 positions?
the positions that we ask for are the minimum that we feel we need to do the additional work to complete.
And then
the
when
current
you guys
file
think you
project.
guys gonna fill these 7 positions, next session?
We're gonna fill them as soon as we can.
But you guys didn't fill the ones that is vacant now.
Right, so these positions are a little different than the vacancies that we have. So some of them,
Well, the 3 out of the 6 is the same that you guys are asking for, the informational technology services.
yeah, so some of them are higher level positions. So we do,
I understand that, but
Yes.
just answer the question about the 3 that is being vacant from 2019, 3 out of the 6. You can see it's on page 1837, on the table, tax 10711.
Why don't you just classify them?
on page 18, is that the one?
18 of 37.
I believe the 3 on those page are unfunded positions. We should only have 1 technology band B position, I believe that's vacant.
But when it comes to the vacancies, are you pooling all the money and then as you fill, you just take from that pool? Or are you leaving the monies with that specific position?
Yeah, we're trying to fill the positions that have budgeted amounts for them. Because of our plan, some of these developer positions, these are the IT band B positions that Senator Favello is talking about. So some of these we are asking for exempt positions, and we're willing to give up these
Yeah.
these positions for them. So I don't know that the plan is, I think if we're allowed to get the exempt positions, we're not planning to fill, planning to give them back to you guys too. I mean,
Okay,
that's
but if
another.
you have some other vacancies that are high priority, why wouldn't you try to fill those? Why wouldn't you try to fill those first instead of just sticking to the ones you're saying have budget?
Yeah, so just to be clear, the team that we're trying to build right now, we don't have any vacant positions like those, right? So we're trying to create new ones. because these are higher level, higher skilled employees than the vacancies that we have. And so I understand what you're saying. It is kind of odd because we have vacancies, but we're asking for more positions, but we're asking for different positions.
Yeah, so why not re-describe the vacancies?
We can take a look at that. Is it a different program?
I mean, the plan is for the vacancies to support our additional, I mean, our current day-to-day tasks, and we believe we still need those positions to to do our day-to-day tasks well. And we're asking for the new positions for the additional work for direct file. So we do, our hope is in order for us to be at maximum capacity and do the work we need to do is to have all the positions filled on both sides.
You never have them all.
But your vacancies are in the hundreds, right? 107.
114 right now, as of today.
Okay, so you couldn't re-describe a couple of those?
I guess we could try to take a look.
Gotta check on the
Take a look.
On the bargaining unit and what programs we have available to pull.
Okay, so what was your rationale? Because I know budget and finance and the governor's office tried to take a look at any position after 3 or 4 years. But I know that some of yours are still on there. So what was your rationale to the governor's office why you should keep them?
For some positions, for example, what jumps to mind is Maui. There are 2 auditor positions in the Maui office that was on the chopping block, so to speak. Around the time the decision was being made whether or not those positions should be deleted, we finally got applicants for the positions. And so as of yesterday, my understanding is one has been filled and the other one, conditional offer has been made. So that one should soon be filled with a permanent employee. And so, and we do need auditors on Maui. So it's not because we don't need the position. Sometimes it's just hard to recruit and find people willing to take the positions. So I think similarly, there are other positions that have been vacant for a while. I think one we're able to re-describe in our compliance section. So we're asking, basically it's a trade-off, but you probably saw it. We're asking for $12,600 from Kauai to be transferred over to Oahu, so we can we basically re-described and upgraded the position, which is a higher salary position. So we're asking for the difference. So in every case where we have vacancies longer than 4 years that we're able to keep, those are positions that I feel like we sufficiently demonstrated that they're important to us, and we just can't, sometimes it's hard to find qualified applicants.
Can you just get all of the IT positions together, the vacancies and what you currently have and what you're proposing, and let's look at the whole picture of what you're trying to do, because you've got vacancies in IT. We're not talking about auditors, we're talking about IT. And you have vacancies. Have they been redescribed? Are you deleting them because you don't need them? What will they do if you keep them? And we need to see that because it's all over the place, as Senator Kim is saying, so that we need something more tangible of where you're going with this.
Sure.
I can speak to the IT vacancies. So on our IT broadband positions, we have 26 total positions. 3 of those are unfunded. So we have 23 funded positions. Out of those 23, 21 are filled. So we have 1 software developer position that we recently promoted that is vacant. And then we have 1 security analyst position that's vacant. On our business analysts, which go under general professional, we have 16 total positions. 13 of those are filled. So we have just 3 vacant positions. We're about to put an offer out for 1 more. We just finished interviews. So projecting to just have 2 vacant coming up.
Okay, I think if you can gather the information in a format that's more like a plan on how you're planning to transition the department to some of the things that you're talking about, because it's not as easily comprehensible just through looking at the tables as to where you're moving. Because some of the descriptions or the titles could be the same or are the same, but it sounds like they do different things.
And also updated our chart, and some of these people that are going in certain areas, like in rules, they're being used for other things. And so they're hiring it under certain, but they're using it for something else, and they're using these positions to justify. So we need to see that this rules office.
Yeah. So if you put it in a format that's, I mean, you could still use those org charts, but add a lot more information so that we can see what's programmatic, what's IT. That way it's easier for us to see how they all interact.
So if you say the position number, or if you say it's a program, security analyst, what are they doing? And so that we know what their job not a whole job description, but what they're doing so that we can see where it fits in a bigger picture of how you're doing your information technology for the whole department.
Do you have a PIO now? You have a PIO?
I have a special assistant that, among other things, does our PIO duties or handles our
And
PIO.
and where are they? Chart, because they're not in your chart. Where's the PIO housed?
The PIO is housed in the director's office.
See the-
We're using it at a rules and exempt rules position for that.
Okay, therein lies the thing, right? You're using somebody in rules to do your PIO, but it's not identified. And so it falls under departments that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, because you're moving them around without even us knowing.
The person that's doing the PIO, among other duties, also handles public record requests, also is our litigation liaison. So basically is doing or supporting everything that the rules office does. And so that's why we feel it's not improper to use the position for that. I mean, if we didn't have that,
No, and that's fine, but it's not identifiable when you're asking for positions like the data to report directly to you, PIO, whether or not it's a PIO, whether.
You just have to make the org chart reflective of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
That's what they want.
Positions are
Yeah.
using different-
So I don't think she's criticizing what you're doing, but it's not translated through the org chart.
it's not
They
transparent.
can't tell.
understood.
Okay, wait, are you done with your table additions?
I didn't go for all. I think we touched upon
You only have
Yeah,
four.
a number of them.
Before Hawaii,
Okay, what, you can continue on that.
table 6.
Back to table 6.
Yeah,
Uh,
priority.
Yeah, so I think we already discussed department priority number 2.
Okay.
So going on to department priority number 3 is, and I think we talked about that one too, which is the data privacy officer.
And then
Number 4 is the 2 positions for Kauai district office.
But that's because, like you said, you had to move the other two to Maui?
N-
Or is this because there's not enough people on?
This is, yeah, so this is different. We're asking for an auditor 4 position and an administrative assistant 2 on Kauai. Right now, Kauai only has 1 auditor. That one, took a while to fill, but we finally filled the auditor vacancy. So we have 1 auditor there. It was vacant for a number of years. However, the amount of audit work just for taxpayers on Kauai is more than just what 1 auditor can handle. So what we're asking for is another auditor to help. Basically handle more audit leads related to that island and do more audit cases. The administrative assistant we need now because right now we don't have an administrative assistant. They're able to do other clerical work. And so what we have is the Kauai district office manager or collection supervisor, for example, or secretaries from other districts having to help out and do that admin work.
Okay, any other questions on table 6? Okay, we'll just continue about the org chart and how you're gonna proceed in a plan later. And then if maybe from now we can hear from Seth.
Thank you.
I have one last
Oh, go ahead.
question. So last year or the year before, we talked about training. Have you folks instituted training? That you didn't have any training, official training of employees, and there were complaints made to me in my office regarding the fact that you don't have anybody training. And
Yeah, so I think last year, and I apologize if you got the impression that we didn't have any sort of quote unquote training or formal training. So what we do have is every employee that is hired at the department through our HR section is provided with onboard training. So, general information about the department and the taxes that we handle. So that is provided to everybody. The employees, in addition to that, get specialized training in whatever section that they end up in. So I think the issue came up, and last year you were talking about, and I believe it was probably in taxpayer services or doc processing or something like that. We have instituted more formalized training in our taxpayer services section. And I think last year the concern was more, well, I'm not exactly sure, but if you want to, I
But
have
you
our,
told me last time there is no formal training program.
yeah, it was not like a classroom setting type sit down training, but we do have now, I believe, several weeks for new employees to come in the taxpayer services section to get basically desk training and then mentoring on top of that. So if you wanted details, I do have my administrator here that can share that with
Now,
you.
but I want to make sure
But
that
yeah,
these people who are interfacing with the public can handle it and know how to respond, because they get really burnt out and the people are not getting the information.
yeah, I agree with you 100%. And we're working on that. So I think
Thank
we've
you.
made progress there.
Okay, I just wanted to bring up one thing that we had sent a memo about previously. So you're asking for more exempt positions. Are you going to be able to institute MQs though? Because some of the conversation we had was you could hire civil service as MQs, but exempt positions don't have MQs.
We would create position descriptions for all of the positions that we're bringing on the exempt ones. Yes.
And they would have a minimum qualifications.
We would build that in. Yes. Because we're looking for experience. These are higher level positions. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Okay.
you've hired, you in the past, you've hired people that don't meet the MQs, and yet I don't know how that computes with what you're saying now.
Which ones are these?
Well, we sent you on August 29, 2024, your concerns about.
For the admin role specialist positions, those, I mean, I guess what we're looking at, I mean, the way, I guess minimum qualifications is not set forth in statute for those positions. We do try to fill them depending on what their job duties are. So certainly if they're going to be working on interpreting tax statutes, doing administrative rules, working on tax administration policy, yeah, then we want somebody with either an accounting background or with a law background. And we try as much as possible to do that. It's not always easy to find people qualified, willing to take the pay that we can offer.
No, but you have, according to your administrative rules specialist job posting on Department of Taxation's own website, the minimum qualifications an eligible candidate should have is as follows: graduated from accredited four-year college or university with a master's degree in accounting or Juris Doctor degree from an accredited law school. Authoritative experience which is involved as a major activity. It goes on and on. Responsible for professional work. So if you're hiring these people under that category, they're handling some of that, but they don't have the minimum qualifications. But you told us that you, under these positions, that you don't have to meet.
That job description was specific to the type of person that we needed to find to do the type of work that we were planning to assign to. Yeah, so it does vary. We have that.
Yeah, but you cannot deviate too far from the
Yeah,
MQs and then the
I agree.
equivalencies, because then that looks awkward.
Especially when you hire somebody specific and people in your offices are telling us they don't meet the requirements and so forth.
But-
They're not doing the job. So people, your own people have concerns.
As long as it's not as, you got to look at not just the MQs, but if you're going to try to deviate, then what are the equivalencies?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just make sure that that's
Experience can make
clear.
up for education, for example. I understand.
Yeah, so if that's what your response was, that's different. But that's not what your guys' response was. Your guys' response was, we don't have to meet the MQs.
Yeah, and I apologize. Maybe that's just a too technical response, but we do think that some flexibility is needed because, for example, if the right candidate comes along or candidates come along with a lot of valuable experience, but not the education part, then, we shouldn't.
No, that's understandable.
Yeah.
That's just, I'm saying that just wasn't your answer.
Yeah, and
Your answer was, we don't have to meet the MQs.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
And it's not as if somebody came by and you found them, then they have that potential. But it's like you took somebody who was in the office, who left the office, came back, and you know what I mean? It's like manipulating the whole system for a particular person, and that's concerning.
Okay, let's hear from Seth. Good news, I hope.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Seth Colby, the Tax Research and Planning Officer. It's a pleasure to be in front of you all. So I'm just going to take the next 5 minutes to describe our revenue trends, where we've come specifically this fiscal year, what's the council on revenue doing, and what are the big variables that I'm looking at over the next 6 months to see if we're on track with our estimates. So first of all, I want to begin with where we are for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. So as of December 2024, this is our preliminary statement. I've adjusted it because we had a couple big revenue boosts, or one big revenue boost in September. So let me just explain what we should be looking at. Hopefully most of you guys are familiar with the preliminary statement and how it works. If you go all the way down, see total general fund, and you go across, before you hit the orange square, you'll see a 12.3%. That is the actual revenues that we've collected, and that's where we are for the first 6 months of the year, which is very robust. The question is why we are up that high amount. The big reason is we had a large collections in the state tax in September 2025. That was approximately 2024. Thank you. $315 million above normal collections. That's a one-off thing. I haven't seen that in my tenure before. So it's real money. It counts. But for the Council on Revenue and people who are focusing on revenue, you can't depend on that every year going forward, right? So one of the things we wanted to do is make an adjustment for that. So people who are understanding and trying to make trends can make decisions based on saying, oh yeah, that's one off. It's still real money. You guys can spend it. But going forward, what should we be expecting, and how does our forecast match reality? So we did take the adjustment. So we took $315 million out of our total collections, and we're at 5.3%, right? So we're at 5.3% for the year, and without that amount and this is important because of the large tax cut law, we have adjusted the withholdings, and going forward, we're going to have large fluctuations of volatility in our revenue because we're keeping less money, right? We've adjusted the withholding tables. All of your constituents are receiving larger paychecks than they were before, take home pay, because we've lowered the withholdings. So that makes our job a little bit more complicated because we're having a divergence, right? So we really wanted to have an understanding where we were before this tax law was going to take a large effect. And we're at 5.3%. But from your perspective, again, this is just interest in forecasting. The real number where we are right now is 12.3%, right? Because it's one off, we didn't expect it, but it's real money and it's yours. So we focus on two big tax types. One is the GET and the other is individual income tax. Up to this year, we are relatively flat for GET. So this is the fiscal year. The orange line is 2020, fiscal year 2024, and the dotted line is fiscal year 2025. You'll see it like we beat the August estimate. We've been below in October, November, slightly above in December. We'll be slightly above that in January as well, right? So it's a little flat. That you can kind of see this in the TAT as well. Our visitor spending has not been as robust as it was in 2021 compared to 2021, around that time. The individual income tax and the corporate tax, I combine those now. We did, just so you guys are aware, we did pass this pass-through entity tax. So high income taxpayers are paying less, or are paying at the entity level at the S corps and their partnerships, which means they're paying more through the corporate income tax. They're really individual income taxpayers. This all nets out. We can go into a little bit more details later if you're interested in it. But the long and the short is, for now, it's very important for us to we combine corporate income tax and individual income tax to get a sense of our total income tax collections. When we do that, you'll see that we're a little bit above for the year, right? Now, going forward, this is going to decline because we're of the tax law, right? So we are withholding less. So our withholding collections are going to be going down. So I would expect that dotted line to fall below the orange line, and that is on purpose. That is by design, because of what you guys have made decisions about. So this is the general fund tax collections. These are all of our tax collections together: GET, individual income tax, and TAT. What you'll see is, yeah, we're above we're above it for the dotted line. And you'll also see in September was just this massive increase, right? And that was the thing that we were adjusting for. So the big things that we're thinking about is the implications of the tax cut law, right? So in fiscal year 2024, we're going to see a decline in individual income tax revenues by $240 million in the next 6 months, right? And after that, it'll get larger and larger and larger. The other thing that's going to be incorporated was the GET exemption on medical payments due to Medicaid and TRICARE and things like that. So all of those are incorporated into the Council on Revenue's forecast, and this is what happened. So there's two lines of numbers. One was the September forecast, and the below is the January forecast. The big difference occurs in 2025. They actually increased it, right? And why did they increase it? It's because of the large estate tax payment. And then in 2026, it falls, right? So it goes to negative 1.5. Now, to a lot of the uninitiated, when we see a negative number, we panic, right? But that's because we have this massive unexpected payment in 2025, and we're adjusting for that, right? Because we just have a higher base. And if you look at the actual dollar amounts between fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year for the September forecast versus the January forecast, the difference is $93 million, right? So that's like about 1% of general fund growth. Between May and September, the Council on Revenues really increased their forecast quite substantially in terms of like just the overall economic outlook. And then and this time they kind of they adjusted back down a bit, but most of the optimism that they felt that change between May and September is still there. So they just kind of tempered things where we are. Generally, it is not that big of an adjustment from where they were before. It's at 0.5% downwards. And, if you think about, okay, 6.4% is what they're forecasting. We're at 12.3 right now. After we take into account all of the tax payments and things, We could make it, like we did that, we were at 5.3%. We were at 5.3% when we had adjusted for those tax payments, right? And so if you did that, we would want to be something closer to 3.5%, so this is a long way of saying we're within the range of what the council on revenue is forecasting in fiscal year 2025 and 2026. And that's it for me. I'm happy to answer any more questions about longer term trends or what's happening. Hopefully I gave you a clear picture so you guys can make responsible decisions this legislative session.
So their next forecast is in March? When
That's
is?
correct. Yes.
And your opinion?
I mean, my opinion is I support whatever the council on revenue forecast and do that. The big question they're going to have is the April payments, right? So that we receive our biggest payment or collections month is always April, and they will not have met that. And so that will be much of the discussion there. And unless we see like some kind of big shock to the revenues or something like that, I don't see how they're going to get much more information over the next 2 months for the March estimate.
So the governor paints a really bright future early on a month ago. Like we have all these monies. So, and he dictated, right, where we're getting all these monies from. And yet he's also asking that we're going to start charging fees for all sorts of things. And with the forecast of the tourist industry, it's very concerning because we don't see that in the forecast. Our visitor industry counts does not look very good in the forecasting. So, okay, well, I just had to say that because I'm not sure if he's really sitting down and talking to you folks. Because the public is telling us you have all these monies that the governor is putting out there. So it's giving us a different picture. Just to add that, what we're hearing from our constituents, I'll leave it with that. Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Just along what you were saying, I mean, I don't like to throw a number out there, but the number that they're telling us that they're looking in the forecast that is being said by the upstairs is $1 billion surplus. So I don't know numbers, on that general map, but is that the forecast? That we have $1 billion surplus?
Two different departments.
Oh, sorry,
So we can ask
wrong
that,
channel.
we can ask that for BNF.
Okay, sorry, wrong channel.
Yeah.
Be ready to answer the question.
Right. And just so like the council on revenue is the number that BNF takes. Right. And then you guys and BNF argue amongst yourselves about like, this is what we have spending, this is the overall surplus, and that's your decision making. What we try to provide is clarity about the amount of revenues we're bringing in so you guys can make the decisions. And a surplus, the word surplus to us doesn't really matter because you need to talk to BNF in order to understand what you're spending in the collections, right?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
The September spike, is that going to come again, or what was the cause for that 300?
Okay, so it's a state tax collections, right? Obviously.
Through audits or what? How?
No, it's a one-off collection. We can't really, due to protecting taxpayer confidentiality, we really can't talk more about it other than that. But it's one-off. You talk to people who've been saying this for 15 years. Nobody's ever seen it. Nobody's ever going to expect it again.
Okay, we're gonna recess, and then we'll be back at 12:30 to continue with the economic outlook. So we'll have the different economists here, and then we'll hear from BNF. Recess. Thank you. Okay, reconvening Ways and Means. So next we'll hear from several state economists on our economic outlook. And following that, we had scheduled Department of Budget and Finance, but we're going to be rescheduling BNF since they're working on responding to the White House memo that went out to the different nonprofits and state agencies. So they're having to deal with that issue. And so we'll have them come in front of us at a later time. So good afternoon. You got to get up there in front of the mic if you're going to present.
When John Canapo, who's gonna,
Well, his name is up there.
Happy New Year. Tomorrow is Chinese New Year.
Happy New
Today
Year.
is the New Year.
Tony Fachoy.
Yeah, Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee, I'm Eugene Tian, Economic Research Administrator with DBAT. Let me go over my slide. Let me give a summary. Data changes every day. So there are some new data. The positive area in our economy, usually we have the full year data for 2024. Construction activity remain very strong. That reflected with the payroll jobs in the construction industry. The volume of construction measured by the contracting tax base is our estimate for 2024 calendar year will be 13 billion. And that is a historical high level. And authorized residential unit, you see, this is 9 months, is 40.2%. So we actually have the new data for the full year. The increase is over 70%. So the residential unit reached about 5,300 in 2024, which is the highest in the past 17 years. A lot of construction will be in the residential as well as in the government. Real estate, home sales, though the interest rate was high, mortgage rate was high, but in 2024, the sales increased 18% for the first 3 quarters. And price also increased. Another good thing is the labor market. Unemployment rate, we were at 3% for the full year. We released the number yesterday for December. So we actually ranked the 10th lowest in the nation. And we have been consistently at about 3% for 5 months, 2.9%. Then December is 3%. Then initial unemployment claim, for the full year 2024, we are even lower than 2019 level, except Maui. We have challenges including inflation. Hawaii is high. We are the highest among the major MSA cities, and labor force shrinking. Although census data show that we have increase in population in 23, 24, but we do see people leaving the labor force. And we saw about 15,000 for between the third quarter 2019 and third quarter 2024. With the industry, we are going to release the data on Thursday, this Thursday. And the number for the last 5 months, it looks good. So for the year ending in December, we'll see some flat in terms of expenditure and also the arrivals. At the beginning of the year, we decreased inventory spending and expenditure. For future growth potentials, looking at the data for the last 20 years, we see healthcare, professional services, construction, of course, the recovery of tourism, and also diversified agriculture, and especially aquaculture, renewable energy, retail, and technology. Let me go over the details. So this shows the January economic forecast by the 50 U.S. economic forecasting organizations. It shows that the economy in 2025, the last 2 columns, 2025, 2026. So you can see compared with 24, a few of the tourism source countries like Canada, Japan, they are going to be better this year than before, especially Japan. The economy was negative in 24 and is going to be 1.1% increase in 2025. And the European countries is going to be better. Australia is going to be better. So I think these will attract more visitors. At least will sustain the visitor arrivals from the US mainland.
Wait, can you go back?
Yes.
But the volume of the first line is so much greater than all the rest combined.
You mean the US?
Yeah, so even because it went down from 2.7 to 2.2, the impact is so great from that. Do the increases from the others make it up?
Yeah, the US economy has been growing better than anybody expected
But
because
you have it down there.
yeah, it is
Percent.
the growth rate is down. You can see from 2.9 and 6.1 to all the way to 2.0. But for the last 20 years, we are talking about between 2019, those 20 years, the growth rate for the US economy is 1.9%.
Yeah, that's just not that it's misleading, but Hawaii markets are mainly in certain parts of the US. So,
Yeah.
you know, like in California, there's no way that's probably negative. And so other parts of the country are probably positive to kind of like balance that out to 2.5 or 2.2.
Yeah, I think, Senator, you are absolutely right. I think the forecast may revise every month, and the new one will be coming on February 10th. Given that the new administration, the policy, the tariffs, I think the economic growth may be lower for all the countries because every country is impacted by the tariff. And also, I'm going to cover the California. The LA wildfire does have impact because the visitor from LA is about 9% of our total visitors. California alone is 30%. But we see it in the last 20 days, we see the flight decrease.
Yeah.
And we also see the passenger decrease by about 13%.
Yeah. Because, but is this information being relayed to HTA? Because then, you know, I know they have like a disagreement of if there's an emergency, and the fact that we're going to probably you're talking about that we have a decline from California, which is 30% of our market, and they're arguing if it's an emergency or not, when clearly 30% of our market, Japan is still low, LA and California is being hit. So we have to figure out where we're going to market soon to other parts of the US or someplace else to make that up. And I'm not sure if HTA and DBED is working on that. I don't even think that's part of their discussion now. They're so busy arguing about the emergency funding or not versus figuring out where should they be putting that money so we can make sure that we can stabilize arrivals.
Great. I'm so happy you use the data to formulate policy and the questions to
Okay.
HTA.
I just wish other people who are supposed to implement would.
That's great. We will be happy to see the implementation based on the data.
Yeah.
But I do see that because though the LA area contribute about 9% of our total visitors, but in January, the arrival from elsewhere in the US is great. There is always a substitution.
Yeah, there is. The thing is, if we don't market there, how are we going to make sure that we can sustain increased arrivals from other parts of the country?
Yeah, to Chair's point, how much of this data is being given to HTA in terms of their planning so that they're looking forward to where do we target?
Yeah, they don't know.
But how do you connect the two? Because it's in the
They
same
make it
department.
public for everybody to look at. They're not going to go hand deliver it.
Jim can.
Okay, we don't want to. Okay, just keep
go on,
going.
go on.
Keep going.
Okay. HTA is part of DBED. So they use our data very heavily. They are heavy user of our data. Let me continue to the, continue to the economic recovery. You can see our recovery is the second lowest in the nation. Just a little bit better than, I think that's North Dakota.
Yeah.
So,
So what in your mind, because I look at that, and if we're the second slowest recovery,
yes,
then what is our plan?
that's an implementation.
Because then if that's not, to me, somewhat of an emergency,
Mm.
so that we have minds working to like change that so that we're further in. I don't know, something's not connecting, but that's not for you to decide.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Okay, let me continue. Our recovery is slow, is the second lowest in the nation. I think it's mainly because our economy is more concentrated. So I will show you more, but you can see non-tourism has been recovered. Although small, but it's 3.9% higher than the 2019 level. But tourism is 94.5% recovery. So it's still recovering. And you can hear from us, from your hero, the recovery will take a long time. So
Well, I think California is even going to further delay the recovery
it will delay the recovery.
unless HTA starts going somewhere else to mine visitors.
That's very good. You have a lot of questions to HTA.
Okay.
They will be, I think they are listening. They will prepare for the answers. Okay, let's continue. This shows the bottom line. You can see the 5 sectors in our economy contribute 67.5% of our economy. You see how our economy is concentrated. For the US, for the 5 sectors, they are about 55%. It's a lot lower. So Hawaii's economy is mainly concentrated with the 5 sectors. Mainly is tourism. You can see the and government and real estate. And in the last 20 years, data from BA shows that the top sectors, they have been increasing in their contribution to the economy. Finance and insurance is pretty much flat. And we have many sectors is declining in economic contribution. And this shows the labor market. And as I said in the summary, the initial income claims was down in the full year 2024, but for the first 2 weeks, 2025 increase. I think the increase, we did look at it, what causes the increase. Is it because of layoffs? Is it because of the strikes? But I think it's mainly because of the holidays. The change in, we don't see too many significant increase in the layoffs or strikes. So it's the changing in holidays. Then the payroll jobs. This shows the full year 2024 compared with the full year 2019. You can see Hawaii County has been fully recovered. And mainly because Hawaii County is the dependent on tourism is the least among the neighbor island counties. Yeah. But the Honolulu recovery is only 98%. Is because Honolulu is mainly depends on the Japanese visitors. It's about on the neighbor islands, the international visitors is about 15%, 85 domestic. Oahu is about 50. So 50% is international, about 50% domestic. So international recovery is very slow. That impact Oahu.
Yeah, but the Maui number is really bad.
Yeah, it's you look at 88.3%.
And Kauai is worse than we are.
Yes.
So again, I'm not sure if those island chapters and HTA are looking at these numbers. But
I'm sure they are. They are looking at these numbers even at this moment. Okay, the construction is booming, and for the first 9 months, our estimate is increase is 19.6%. That is construction completed, which means is tax, and the G tax is based on. Then we look at the building permit. This is including all the building permit, state, federal, federal doesn't need a permit, state and county and the private is increased by 27.1%.
yeah, but would you, if would you be able to guess or determine what the numbers would be if the permitting with issues were solved?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a problem, or especially for the government.
Yeah, but I don't
contract.
think the permitting departments feel like they're part of the economic impact.
I think the mayor has already have a target 180 days to issue the building permit. I think that 180 days will be good, because for government construction project, the average day between the first day of application to the last day I get approved, not even started construction, that is over 600 days. So it is a long time.
Yeah. I mean, especially the neighbor island, Oahu and the neighbor island counties, if tourism is down, they got to get construction up.
Get something. Yeah.
I'm not sure if people are connecting these dots, but anyway.
Okay. So these are the project. I think you have the file. It is kind of small, but you can see a lot of construction project, big ones. We listed only the project over 20 million. All the county government, they actually release those data on daily basis. So we collect them and see what is happening in the economy. You can see a lot of residential permit is mainly in the affordable housing. Then we look at the number of home sales, it increased 18%. Is actually, you can see in 2024, for all the counties increased. And this is a lot of smaller than 2021, but it is a good increase from 2023. This is the number of home sales. If you look at it, the price, the top one shows the single family is all increased. And then the bottom one shows the condo is a mix, but you see the citywide is still a 2.4% increase. And interesting fact is that on Maui, so you can see Maui's single family price is lower than condo. So Maui County is also the highest among all the counties in terms of housing price. And also Maui County is the most crowded county in terms of square foot per person. So I think in terms of the housing, Maui need more. And look at the visitors. The visitor recovery, this is 11 months. The December data will be released on Thursday, this coming Thursday. So you can see that the US is, for the US West, is still 8.2% higher than 2019. US is 3.5% higher, but Japan, 45.1%, Canada and other countries, because mainly is the economy for Japanese and also the exchange rate. The exchange rate, I think currently is about 150, and in the summer it's 160. The typical flight from Japan in 2019 is 93, is about 88% for the full year. 88% they are Japanese visitors. Now it's about 70%. So 18% they are non-Japanese. So we hope that in the new year, 2025, 26, those visitors composition will be more Japanese visitors. So we actually project the Japanese visitor recovery. It was 45.1% last year. Our projection for this year will increase to about 58%. It's still small, but it will be an improvement. Then this shows that the Japanese recovery compared with all the last bar to the most right is the total outbound from Japan, Japanese outbound travel. You can see the recovery in 2024 is 65.9%. And you see the Korean, Korean increased the most, but Hawaii is the least. So we are 45.1%. We're even lower than the US. So I think that means we have a lot of potential. I don't think the Japanese will give up Hawaii. I think they will be coming, but just taking the time. Our forecast is Japanese recovery will not happen until after 2027. Our forecast frame is up to 2027, and we still don't see the full recovery for Japanese visitors. And LC for this first 9 months data, we feel is pretty good data because airlines, they didn't put for the full year, for the last quarter, and we do see there a decrease. So this year it will be in the tourism industry, it will be a challenge because the air seat, we see a 0.3% decrease. And this is because of the last, during the last months, there was some consolidation between Alaska Airlines and Hawaiian Airline. Although we see some reduction in Alaska and we see increase in Hawaiian, but at the net, we still see a decrease in flight. The combined two airlines, and there will be about 100 flights decrease, translate into about 28,000 air seat will decrease. So that is in here, but it wasn't in our December forecast.
Do you have a breakdown of which areas of the US East the visitors are coming from?
Yeah, we do have the visitors by, I might say, by state, of course, and we also have by MSA, which means is major cities. Like that's how we get 9% LA, because the big cities, and we do have data.
I mean, and when I look at that, it appears to me that we would invest more in marketing in some of those US East cities. I mean, you don't have it broken down, but I'm not sure what those are, because US West is probably only going to go down.
I think
You don't
that's
think so?
Yeah.
With the LA fires, you think they're still going to come? Well, that's interesting. Well, we'll see in a year. And if you're wrong, if you're right, your hero gets extra funding. If you're wrong, I don't know about that.
Okay. Yeah, Carl will tell you more about tourism. I know Carl is a little bit more pessimistic on Japanese. Inflation, we're high. I think in 2024, we are 4.4%. Is higher than the US, is around 3%. Then our forecast, the top line shows the population, and our forecast is a little decrease, but a population growth will be slow. Our forecast will be 0.3% a year for the next 10 years, and down to 0.2, then down to 0.1. So we will not see the 2% or 1% increase we experienced in the past 30 years. And currently, we do see Big Island. We already have a negative natural growth, which means more deaths than births. And for statewide, we have about 2,000 more births than deaths. In the next few years, maybe 5 years or so, we'll have more deaths than births. And because birth rate has been declining, in future, population growth will be all coming from migration from international. So the new administration at the federal level may impact that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a bit of westernized areas.
Yeah. Then we do see the visitor, you can see visitor arrivals on the second line. And by 2027, we project that will be recovered, fully recovered. And jobs is called non-agricultural wage and salary jobs. And you can see that will recover also by 2027. So the recovery in tourism is mainly coming from the US mainland. Yeah. And our economic growth, 2024, our forecast 1.6, and this year is similar to the US, is about 2%. 2% is pretty good growth rate because our average for the last 20, before 2019, is about 1.5%. So for the next few years, we project about 2% increase is mainly driven by the construction activities as well as the recovery of tourism. That concludes my section.
Thank you.
A lot of questions to cover.
Yeah.
Question. I have a question on your inflation slide.
Okay.
I think that was slide 2. Slide 2. Yes, this one.
This one, yeah.
So is this a correlation to what the Federal Reserve is doing in terms of on their proposal? I know they've kind of hold off with inflation and cutting, right? Because if we cut further on the interest rate, the thought is that that could pose for higher inflation. Is that sort of a correct assessment? Is there a correlation between what we see here that's high at sort of the federal level?
I think the federal is the opposite, because when the inflation is low, and they will try to cut the interest rate. If the interest rate is high, they are trying not to cut. I think the inflation is very rigid. That's why you can see the Federal Reserve Committee for 2025. Initially, the economists project they will increase, they will cut by 100 base point. And I think now the new forecast is about at the most will be 50. Means maybe twice or once for the full year. And the inflation in Hawaii is mainly driven by housing, especially rental. The rental price has been increased is about 10.3% for the full year. That is the highest in the whole US, because
Doesn't make any sense.
yeah, it doesn't make sense. It is the federal data. We as economists, we sometimes question the federal data because a lot of data is collected by the federal, including the GDP, including the personal income, and as well as this inflation. So the inflation is mainly due to the housing.
Net out housing, inflation is less than 2%.
Yeah, it's very small.
Okay, no, I just was curious to know if there were any anomalies based on what the projection is and how we were tracking at the federal level. Because I even know with the administration's proposal on tariffs and mass deportation, that could also drive up the cost and inflation.
Drive up the inflation because Hawaii, we have about 88.4% of our food imported. If we calculate it, everything we are over is about 80%. Everything we consume, including food, furniture, computers, everything is about 80% is imported. So
mostly, so there's no tariffs there, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you, Doctor, for the clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. I don't know, but if it could be from the US as its last point, but quite a bit of those materials are from someplace else.
Absolutely.
Anyway, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair.
And Senator Elefante.
And full house. It's I guess
trusted
they
you
knew who was going to be
to read the
talking, so
TV.
they stayed away. So this is the title from our fourth quarter report. And the key word there is uncertainty. And we were focused on the uncertainty created by new policies that, at the time in December, all we knew is what the campaign promises were. And there was a wide range of those. And so we made a set of assumptions about what tariff policies would actually occur. We made a set of assumptions about what would happen in fiscal policy. So, for example, we assumed that the Tax Cuts and Job Act would get extended, but we didn't assume that there would be no taxes on tips. And that we wouldn't be paying taxes on Social Security benefits and things like that. Now we could end up being wrong, and we also made some assumptions on about deportations, and so combined, you put all the and I would say we made some pretty modest assumptions. I would say that what we have seen since December and particularly since Inauguration Day, I think confirms that we're probably in the ballpark on labor market effects from deportations. It looks like that's going to be pretty
pretty enforced and has the potential to reduce the U.S. labor force significantly. The tariff one is really up in the air because you can't tell right now whether they're just bargaining chips and just threats, or if we're actually going to see them. I mean, actually, we've got just a few days, right? February 1st is the deadline for, or at least the announced deadline for 25% on Canada and Mexico. So we'll know more shortly. And in our next report, we will update what the wrong way. So we were talking earlier about US GDP, our forecast, which took into account. So see, we have over 2% for 2025. I think that's 2.5%. That's because it's going to take some time for tariffs and deportations to start to act as a drag. And so by 2026, we're below 2%. And then by 2027, we're at about 1%. And that's essentially our estimate of the full effect. So you would have seen GDP growth come down from the 3% range in 23 and 24. It was ultimately going to be coming down to around 2% or a little less than that, because that's essentially how fast the U.S. economy could grow with productivity growth and population growth or labor force growth. So in 2027, our forecast of about 1% is a full 100 basis points lower than it probably would have been without the tariffs and the deportations. And the tax stuff is pretty up in the air. We did not make assumptions about deregulation. And there is certainly a possibility that some deregulation could reduce business operating costs and could stimulate the economy. And some of the investments that the new administration is talking about could stimulate the economy a bit. So we'll be revising these as we go forward, as more information becomes available. We were talking about the Fed just a few minutes ago. So in our forecast, inflation in the U.S. begins to rise again later half of 2025 as the tariffs start to have their effects, and peak roughly 100 basis points higher than we thought they would be, maybe a little bit more than that. So peak in the 3 to 3.5% range in 26 and 27. So we're not talking about a return to, the post-pandemic inflation rates. And this is a chart that the reason I show this is the bond market's prediction of 5-year inflation rates. So it's the pointer here. So after bottoming out, that bottom is actually right at the Democratic convention. And after the Democratic convention, the betting market started assigning a higher and higher probability to a Trump victory. And as those market expectations of a Trump win, which would mean they would come with tax cuts, come with tariffs, come with deportations, the bond market also started predicting higher inflation. Now, this also coincided with stronger economic data, right? We had strong labor market data and some stickiness in the incoming inflation data. But that's the highest the inflation prediction has been since March of 2023. So it's at 2.5%. The reason I show this is because the Fed will look at this, right? So the Fed is going to be data driven. They're going to be looking at the incoming data. I think tomorrow when they announce what they've decided at this meeting, there'll be no change in interest rates. But they will be looking at inflation expectations. And not only is the bond market signaling higher inflation, but consumer expectations are as well. The University of Michigan survey, which you should always take with a grain of salt, but it's got long-term inflation expectations have jumped to 3.2%. So that all tells me that the Fed, the blue line here is the Fed funds rate. So in our forecast, we have 1 rate cut this year. I mean, you could convince me that we'll get 2. You could convince me that we'll get 0. And the story is higher for longer. Which had been the mantra last year, but now it's really the mantra. In other words, it's not that we're saying interest rates are going to go up. It's just they're not coming down anywhere near as much as we thought or the bond market thought or most economists thought just 5 or 6 months ago. And so what that means is for us, we actually have an increase in the 10-year bond rate. It's already increased quite a bit post-election. We have it hovering around 4.8, 4.9%. And the mortgage rate basically barely coming down at all. So from 7, it's flattening out here around 6.6, 6.7. So that has implications for Hawaii, obviously, in terms of housing affordability. It has implications for exchange rates. So if you went back 6 months, our sort of thinking was Bank of Japan is going to be raising interest rates because they're experiencing some inflation. They're sort of getting back to almost normal monetary policy, while the Fed was going to be cutting interest rates, and that would have strengthened the yen. That's mostly off the table now with tariffs and with an expectation of higher inflation in the US. So higher interest rates in the US than they would have been even while Japan raises interest rates. Our forecast for yen appreciation is gone. Very, very, very slight improvement in the yen over the next few years. And all this is really critical because, as we were talking earlier, the US visitors they're in charge right now. They 3/4 of our visitors are coming from the US. This is similar data to what, Eugene and I are using all the same data in almost all cases. This is data from, says HTA, it's from DBED. And this just shows you those recovery numbers that Eugene was showing, because I've indexed everything to 100, right? You line everything up at 100 in pre-pandemic. And so you can see that the US visitor after the revenge travel in the summer of 2021, which I always quip is the summer of the U-Haul truck rental car on Maui. That's not that funny. Basically, they've remained above pre-pandemic level almost continually, right? So we still have more US visitors as of November. We don't have the December data yet than we did back in January of 2020. It's all seasonally adjusted data. So the key is that really all the markets except for Japan are basically recovered. And the Japanese market is still hovering right around 50% of their pre-pandemic level. I just looked at our forecast. We don't have a Japanese recovery no time this decade. Not back to pre-pandemic levels. And that's really consistent with Japanese visitor behavior over 30, 40 years. If you look, we never recovered to the pre-Japanese bubble numbers. We never recovered to the Asian crisis, pre-Asian crisis numbers of visitors. And we don't think that's going to happen. So it's really important what happens in the United States in terms. And so let's talk a little bit about California. So yes, LA, and by LA we're talking about the MSA, which includes, that's like 12 million plus people. I think it's 13 million people, and that metropolitan area brings about 9% of our visitors and 9% of our spending. But the fires and the people impacted by the fires, and I haven't seen the latest numbers after the additional fires we had further south, but be generous and people who were literally, say people who were evacuated, you're talking maybe 400,000 or 500,000 people. So, all of LA didn't shut down. So we're not suddenly going to lose, 9% of our visitors. Even if you assume that everybody who was sort of directly impacted had planned to travel to Hawaii and is no longer going to travel to Hawaii, you still get a fraction of 1% impact. Now, it's very possible it will be broader than that because of the disruption and the emotional toll and so on. But it's not clear to me that this elevates to a crisis. If I were to argue what I think is a crisis is marketing for Maui. Because if you look at where the pukas are in tourism, they're still on Maui, right? The recovery is doing a little bit better. So let's actually look at the Maui slide. So the top line here, the top chart here is average daily visitor census. Monthly, again, it's indexed. This time it's indexed to 100 right before the wildfire. And the dark blue line is the state excluding Maui. So all the other counties, they actually went up initially because visitors who would have gone to Maui went to other counties. But basically that has, that's above where it was before the wildfires. So we've seen a little bit of growth in tourism. This is average number of visitors in the islands. Arrivals could be lower, but with an increase in length of stay, you still have more people, which is really what matters in terms of spending. So the reason that state average daily census has been as weak as it is because of Maui. And as I said, the November numbers were an improvement, and I'm optimistic that December will as well. But that's really, if you could bring the visitors back to Maui, you would completely offset. Of course, many of them would have come from LA. And then if you look at the spending numbers, if you take the state excluding Maui, real visitor spending, so taking out that 4.5%, almost 4.5% inflation for the year, is just barely negative. If you look at state as a whole, it's down about 5%. So that's year to November compared to 2023. So that 5% decline statewide in real spending is about $1 billion. And it's because of a 15% decline on Maui, where the highest spending visitors typically are because of their high room rates. So if Maui continues its recovery and we continue a slow recovery in Japanese visitors, which is what we're forecasting, then for 2025 as a whole, we're going to see a small increase in visitor arrivals, probably not a big increase in visitor spending, but some improvement. The bottom panel here is all about labor market, and there you can see that Maui's on the right axis. This is labor force on Maui. So instantly, Eugene was talking about labor force and about the loss of labor force, right? So the blue line here is the state going all the way back to 2017, at about 610,000 in 2017, a little bit less than pre-pandemic, but falling to about 585,000. So losing 20, 25, 30,000 people out of the labor force over that time frame. That data is going to get revised up because census, I was going to say something flippant about the way the census did the population. So the census revised the population data for the entire country, and they revised it because they did some really hard work to get better estimates of the number of migrants. Right, so they were badly undercounting the number of people coming in over the southern border, and most of this revision was what they call I can't remember the terminology they use, but it's people who are allowed into the country because of turmoil in their country, right? They are actually allowed in. They can apply to get a driver's license. They can apply to work, and so census was badly undercounting them. And almost the entire revision in their population count at the national level was because of that change. So then they took that number at the national level and then they distributed out to the states based on the state's demographic makeup. Now, I understand that this is hard to do, but my guess is that most of these migrants who were coming across the southern border, some of them would have been coming in by airplane if they were allowed in. But my guess is a lot of them aren't coming across the southern border and then turning around, getting on a bus, going to LA or San Francisco, getting on an airplane and coming to Hawaii. And so I'm skeptical of the boost in our population, but it's going to show up in the labor force. Our labor force numbers are going to get revised up, and our employment counts are going to get revised up. So let me go. So I'll talk briefly about, this is payroll job counts. And the payroll job counts, the reason, so we have a little bit less than 1% growth for total payroll jobs in the state. It's going to get revised. Our estimate is we'll probably end up with about 0.8% growth. That's pretty darn anemic growth. And the reason for the growth is recovery on Maui and really Oahu. The Big Island and Kauai, since first quarter of the year, have seen payroll jobs decline. So it's really has been a story. Part of that is because of the growth in construction jobs, which are getting counted on Oahu because the home base of the companies is on Oahu. Even if they're doing work on Maui, many of them are getting counted on Oahu. So I mentioned the $1 billion loss in real visitor spending. That's being completely offset by, Eugene pointed to the contracting tax base. This is permit data. So the dark blue line is residential permits in real dollars. The green wedge is non-residential. And then so once you don't look at the height here, if you want to see how big government contracts are, it's that that wedge. So normally, if you look at how wide this is, normally it's about $1.5 billion a year in real dollars. And right now it's at its peak, it's more like 3 to 4 billion. And I mean, this is data where we've taken the original data on government contracts, and then we spread it out over time because the projects take multiple years, whether it's rail or Pearl Harbor, right? The contract gets let, all the money shows up, but the work takes years to happen. Just like when you look at the residential permits, so the permits that Eugene had up, that one of them was a project in Kaka'ako. It's a high res. That project's almost done, right? We in Hawaii, for some reason, the permits get issued about 3 days before people occupy the building. And so it's really a backward-looking indicator. It's not a forward, at least for high rise. Not so much for places like Ho'opili, where they're drawing permits and then building the building. So the takeaway, most of that's Pearl Harbor, but it's not all Pearl Harbor. It's also money that went to DOT from the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. Some of that potentially is at risk with the announcements from Washington that we had in the last few days. Probably not much. I would say this is probably an undercount because we haven't put a stadium in there. I think we might get a stadium.
And a prison.
Right. Yeah. We have not built those in, and it's very possible those will materialize. This has also contributed to in the summer, construction jobs reached an all-time high, and they've come off that high, but they're still we're still close to the 40,000 person mark. Just going back to California for a second, I think one area where we could get hurt by the disaster in California, in addition to whatever negative impact it has in tourism, is really in construction costs because of the rebuild costs there, and not just California, right? We've had plenty of disasters across the entire country. And so material costs, particularly if you then throw tariffs on top of that, and then labor costs. If you deport a large number of unauthorized laborers who work in construction, and then people are trying to rebuild in California or the Carolinas or in Florida, they're going to be bidding up labor. They're going to be building up wages for contractors. That makes it harder for us to bring contractors in. It encourages our construction workers to consider working for 6 months in LA instead of on Oahu, because there's some risk here that construction costs and labor costs and
also affect what is going to happen with Maui's construction for
absolutely
additional housing.
Yep.
You remember what years was that when we had the industries throughout when they were building up Las Vegas?
Oh yeah.
Then that affected Hawaii because we couldn't get all of the building materials coming in. So with that said, with LA's rebuilding in the next year or so, then where is how the effect will have on housing to escalate to a point where we want them to start now, but it may affect all of us.
I think it will. I have a hard time giving you a precise number about how much, but I don't think it's positive. Let's put it that way. Yeah. And so we're raising our forecast for construction costs. And then what tends to happen is when subcontractors start bidding on projects, so particularly large projects, they worry that they won't be able to find workers or they won't be able to get materials. And so they pad their bids because they don't want to lose money on projects, and it starts to slow projects down. So I think that's very real. So, but in the short run, that the construction activity is completely offsetting that loss of visitor spend. And longer term, once we get past the sort of next couple of years of this construction cycle, our forecast for tourism is some continued recovery in numbers of bodies, but spending going sideways. And that's mostly just because that's the way it works most of the time, historically, right? If you look at the historical data on real visitor spending, it's punctuated by, these crises, and you get recoveries right? You get bounce back from the various crises, but then over time it goes sideways because of per person per day spending is declining in real dollars. Maybe this time will be different, but our forecast is basically that real visitor spending is not going to grow very much over the next several years. So this is the same kind. So now I'm sort of thinking about longer term. What are the issues? And really, I mean, honestly, demographics are going to drive a lot. I talked about the loss of labor force, and Eugene talked about their population forecasts being very, very, very slow growth. Ours is for actual decline, small decline. And this shows the trend of natural population change each year from 2010. So in 2010, Honolulu, which is measured on the left axis, was about 7,000 births greater than deaths. And today it's about 2,000. And all the counties have a very similar trend. Actually, nationally, we have a similar trend.
Yeah.
People simply are not having children. And we're all getting older, and we did see a surge in deaths during the pandemic, but that's largely gone away. And you can see that Big Island and Maui are essentially at zero, sometimes slightly negative. But the interesting part about that is Big Island has been growing population, not because of births, but because of migration, right? Whereas Maui, Oahu have been losing population because of out-migration. So Oahu, we're still having more children than are passing away, but more people are leaving. And so that's really the long-term trajectory of the state depends on whether conditions are such that people want to stay here and or return here. And those conditions include, everything from job creation, right? The kinds of jobs that people can.
Do you have some kind of analysis of what demographic is moving in?
Yeah, so I think we talked about this last year too, and we did a bunch of, so our conclusion from what's available in the micro data from census is that the measurement errors that are in when you start to dig down into the demographic groups and the age groups and whether they're working or not working, and the numbers, the sample sizes get so small that ultimately you can't say anything definitive, right? So you can't say there's more people in the 18 to 30-year-old group that are leaving versus coming, or that are leaving versus older people. So we have some plans to get the full sample of data so we could dig into that issue and to also explore the impacts of disasters like the wildfire on out-migration.
Yeah, I'm just
but we're not
wondering
there
for
yet.
Big Island, if it's mainly retirees, then that doesn't help us with our labor force.
Well, so that would, so the fact that, so I was about to say they've had more job growth, but that may have ended in the middle of the year. They were, until recently, they were adding more jobs. And I think post-pandemic, I think actually Eugene mentioned this, they're the only county that has completely recovered their job count. And so at least some of those people, not all of them are retirees.
Yeah.
Many of them are working.
Yeah.
Good point.
Are you looking at what kinds of jobs they're working in? Is it agriculture? And,
Well, it sounds like he has to, you have to study on this.
So, yeah, I mean, you could do that in the jobs data, right? You could see but you wouldn't be able to tell from the jobs data whether that was a previous resident who took that job or if it was a new migrant. And we did try to, so in the census data that you have on the people who are moving, I think we can tell people who move out, we know if they had a job before they moved out, but you don't know what industry, you don't know which type of job they have.
Yeah, but we know where we have shortages, like we can't find medical professionals, vets. I mean, even our own engineers for the state. So we're getting a lot of immigration, but we're still having a hard time filling certain industry and government positions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, with the demographic changes, right? So some of this is just because people are getting older and they're leaving the workforce. And I mean, nationally, it's an enormous number of people who are turning 65 every year. And they're leaving the workforce. And so, and then if you're not, if we haven't been having children and you're struggling, people are struggling to make ends meet here because they can't find the kind of job they want that pays enough, then yeah, we're going to have challenges filling those roles, and we have to be more creative. Right.
Like for Big Island, I can say that it seems like the, right now, the feeling is people are coming in for healthcare workers. And it seems like because of the increase, that we're doing with our Hilo Hospital,
Right.
the additional clinics in Puna. Interesting. Just to add, Chart, I was at a doctor's
Wait,
appointment.
how many more slides do you have?
Maybe 3.
Okay.
And the
talk
healthcare
fast.
people over here, they're saying they went to Hilo College, they came back here to work, but now they want to go back. And there were about 2 of them saying, we're specialized people in orthodontics,
I know what you mean.
Yes,
Yeah.
but they prefer going back to work in healthcare in Hilo.
Yeah.
But it seems like the attitude is changing
That's great.
for East Hawaii anyway.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, there's some big investments going on there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes,
That's important.
yes.
So, basically having good paying jobs is critical to people, to the migration issue. And we're not doing real well, right? This is actually same point. Eugene showed it in a bar chart. This shows every single state, and Hawaii is still 3 to 4% below pre-pandemic level for job counts. There's 3 other states plus DC that is in that same situation. But frankly, that's the best. I still call this complete recovery, because if your labor force has fallen that much, there's no place to get the workers. You can't hire people who aren't there. And so some of this is just purely demographic. And then there's housing, and you can't read that, but this is from our fact book, which we're working on the update for 2025 right now. And the highlighted area right in here is just basically showing that on every county, these numbers are roughly 30%. They're pretty close. I think 28 on Oahu, maybe 29 on Maui. That's the share of the population who's spending more than half of their income on rent. And so obviously housing is critical. We are, Eugene also showed, I think, the list of housing projects. We're making some progress there. There's still a lot of work. But honestly, I got to say I'm more optimistic on housing than I have been in a long time. Despite the fact that it still takes a very long time to get a permit. I think there's a chance that will change. So on the population numbers, so these have been updated since the census revisions, and the 2010 to 2019 population growth rates by county and for the state as a whole. So these are big changes, right? The state over the decade from 2010 to 2019 grew population by almost 0.7%. And we think it's going to shrink by 1 to 0.2% for the next decade. Whether it's shrink by 1 or 0.2% or grow by 0.2 to 0.3 that DBED has, it's still a huge change.
Just real quick on that. Are you guys tracking military versus local
So
population?
this is total. And so, yes, the military goes into this count, and the military numbers, actually, I was a little surprised they continued their decline. So we just recently got the 2023 data, and the military personnel is down to around roughly 40,000 people. But I think the bigger change, and if you talk to folks from the DoD, they'll tell you, we're not going back to a world where there's even more troops, right? The nature of what they're doing, I don't know if they're manning their drones from somewhere else in the world but they don't expect, military personnel in the islands to go back to 45,000 or 47,000, barring a crisis. But the other thing that's changed a lot is if you went back, say, a decade ago, and you looked at, say, let's just say there were 40,000 troops at the time, there would have been 60, maybe 65,000 dependents. And now, so there's roughly 1.5 dependents for every not enlisted, but every personnel. Now it's almost 1 to 1. So presumably that a piece of that is just that same thing I was showing with the declining birth rates, is that the families are just getting smaller. So that is playing a role particularly on Oahu, in the size of our population. And one of the reasons why we've seen population decline is because we don't have those military people coming in. And then we also had a significant decline in international migration, particularly during the pandemic. And presumably that's going to repeat itself with the new administration. I mean, I'm worried about there are certain places where we tend to get international migration from, and they get the news. They know that it's not as hospitable, even though it's Hawaii. It's still the news is not good, and it's going to discourage that migration. So I think the point, cautiously optimistic for the next couple of years. That's really still sort of construction cycle. Our numbers differ a little bit from Eugene's, I think, on these real GDP numbers, because we deflate GDP using the consumer price index for Oahu, because there is no GDP deflator for the state of Hawaii. And then I think DBED uses the national, like they use the BEA data, which uses national prices. And so because Hawaii's inflation was higher, we get almost no growth in 2024, which I think is consistent with the job numbers and tourism. So we get growth in the 2% range for 2 years, and that's really Maui rebuilding and the continued construction activity and the end of the drag from tourism. But then if you look where we're headed, it's a demographic story. This is per capita, but it's basically heading back towards our long run per capita real GDP growth is less than 1%. So that's kind of where we're headed. And of course, the challenge is that makes it really hard to do the things that we need to do, whether it's dealing with sea level rise or climate change or schools or take your pick.
That if we act faster with regards to construction of the stadium and the prison, would it change within the next 3 years or not?
Short answer is I don't think so. I think it would. So given the very elevated level of activity we're right now, I'm not sure where we would find the jobs, the workers, let's say you were able to start the stadium in 2026. I think it would be a challenge to find the workers. And so
I think so too, because construction for LA is already going to be starting.
Yeah, and we're already at a very high level, right? And the work at Pearl Harbor is going on for several more years, and the work on rail is going on for a long time. Rebuilding on Maui is going on for a long time.
We don't look for a brighter future soon here in Hawaii for the next 5-10 years.
I mean, look, if the planning right now is, results in the stadium being built in 27, 28 and the prison, same thing. And that could end up being fortuitous, right? It could flatten out the declining construction activity that we're forecasting in the out years.
I have a question, Chair.
Yeah.
On this slide, Director, Dr. Bonham, can you explain in 2021 why GDP was at 6%?
Yeah, that's just pandemic relief. Yeah. Yeah, it's all the federal money that came in.
Thank you.
Can you see what the components are with the GDP that we could say we can boost this up, or I know it's not having the workers, not having the jobs, but where might we boost it up to get the
well? So there's Stephen Bond Smith released a report in July of last year. I think the title of it was Opportunities for Diversifying Hawaii's Economy. And, those are areas to think about and focus on, but they're small, right? So aquaculture, anything related to marine activity, boat building, fishing, diversified ag. It's a long list of well, not a super long list, but a list of industries that through the analysis that he's done, it suggests, so they're small. And when you look at the structure of Hawaii's economy and compare it to the structure of economies across the entire country, our our economic structure would suggest that those should be stronger, right? But they're small. And so it suggests an opportunity. And then the next question is, why are they small, right? So what is it that's preventing those industries from growing or prevent them from being maybe as robust as you might have expected? So some of it could be state or local rules, right? It could be environmental rules that keep, so why don't we have more cages off the Kona coast, right? Why don't we have even more fishing, aquaculture going on off the Kona coast? So it could be environmental rules, right? I don't know what the answer is. The people who know the answer are the combination of the rule maker, but also the industry. The industry should be able to tell you, maybe they don't have access to capital, right? So you identify the areas that have some potential.
Yeah, but we don't have a point of the spear. That's part of the problem, right? There's nobody in the state or in government saying, we got to do these things and move it forward. I mean, they don't just happen.
No, exactly.
And so a lot of these areas with them that list or semi-long list you're talking about, we need more advocates and leadership in those areas. If not, we're just deferring.
We just need a new strategy for how we approach
and leadership,
economic development. Yeah, a strategy. Well, I'm not suggesting we replace any leaders.
People got to take risks and they got to make hard decisions.
Yeah. But then once they've made the hard decisions, then in addition to that, we need an evaluation program so we can because if you think you can come up with many examples where we've built something.
Why start step 2 if you can't start step 1?
But you're going to do step 1 and follow with step 2. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So hopefully, I'm so glad that this time slot was much more convenient.
Well, I appreciate your, yes. I mean, actually, I would have been stuck. I would have got stuck on the mainland if the weather was crazy.
Yeah.
Snow on the ground and all that fun stuff.
No, so thank you for being here.
Thank you. That's very good.
Okay,